Every single day you wait thinking this war has nothing to do with you. The world you wake up in is quietly becoming a different world altogether. And I say that not to alarm you, but because what happened this past Saturday night in the Negev desert of southern Israel is not just another headline about a conflict far away. It is a rupture. It is a threshold being crossed in real time. On the night of March 21st, 2026, Iranian ballistic missiles struck two communities in southern Israel in the cities of Dimona and Arad, leaving buildings shattered and over 180 people wounded in one of the most dramatic escalations since this war began. And here is the detail that separates this strike from everything that came before it. It was the first time Iranian missiles had penetrated Israel's air defense systems in the area around the nuclear site. That nuclear site is the Shimon Peres Negev Nuclear Research Center, a facility located just 10 kilometers from the city of Dimona. A facility officially dedicated to research but widely believed by analysts to house Israel's undeclared nuclear arsenal, a weapons program that Israel has never officially confirmed and never denied. So what you are looking at is not just a missile strike on a city. You are looking at the moment this war crossed into nuclear territory. And if that does not make you stop and think very carefully about where all of this is heading, then nothing will. Now, let's actually go back and walk through how we got here, because the mainstream telling of this story is missing so much context that most Americans are essentially watching a movie that started in the middle with no understanding of how the characters got into the room or why they are fighting. And when you don't understand the beginning, you can't understand the ending either. So, let's start where this really starts. The tensions between the United States and Iran stretch back to the Islamic Revolution in 1979 and the subsequent Iran hostage crisis, which set a tone of mutual hostility and deep distrust that has never fully healed in the decades since. But the immediate chain of events that produced this war is more recent, and it involves a series of decisions made in Washington and Jerusalem over the course of just a few months. In June of 2025, the United States and Israel conducted what was called Operation Midnight Hammer, a limited series of strikes on Iran's nuclear infrastructure. That operation was framed as a surgical intervention, targeted and contained. And then, in the months that followed, Iran did what countries under military pressure tend to do. They adapted. They rebuilt. Iran replenished its medium-range ballistic missile inventory. It established a new nuclear research and development facility called Minzadai in Tehran. It rebuilt elements of its nuclear infrastructure in the months that followed the June 2025 strikes. So the limited war of last summer did not solve the problem. It simply delayed it and in many ways intensified it. Then came the protests. Iran's currency had entered a free fall after the June strikes, exacerbated by the imposition of new international sanctions in September. That economic spiral led directly to the outbreak of massive nationwide protests on December 28, 2025, which spread at the encouragement of the United States across Iran in January 2026, protests that became the most significant popular uprising since the 1979 revolution itself. So you had a population in open revolt, a regime that was economically bleeding, a military that had been degraded in the summer strikes. And what did Washington conclude from all of this? That the moment was ripe for something much bigger, that this was the window, and so the planning accelerated. In February of 2026, the United States and Iran actually sat down for nuclear negotiations. On February 6th, they held indirect talks in Oman's capital, Muscat. A second round took place in Geneva on February 17th. A third round convened on February 26th, and this is where the story gets uncomfortable, because what happened next is deeply revealing about the nature of American foreign policy, not as it is presented to the public, but as it actually operates. Just before the strikes began on February 27th, Oman's foreign minister Badr al-Busaidi said that a breakthrough had been reached and that Iran had agreed both to never stockpile enriched uranium and to full verification by the IAEA, Al-Busaydi said peace was within reach and that talks were expected to resume on March 2nd. After the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran, Al-Busaydi said that he was dismayed and that active and serious negotiations had been undermined. This is the Omani foreign minister, the man who was physically in the room brokering the deal, saying there was a breakthrough, that peace was within reach, and then watching bombs fall the next morning. That is not a small thing. That is the entire context of this war, compressed into one paragraph. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a broad, coordinated joint operation against Iran's nuclear and missile infrastructure. The outset of the conflict was communicated unconventionally. President Trump announced the attacks in a Truth Social post at 2 a.m. Eastern Time. There was no address to the media or public briefing to Congress beyond a notification to the Gang of Eight shortly before strikes commenced. So the most consequential act of American military force since the Iraq War was announced on social media at 2 in the morning. No Oval Office address, no formal declaration. No serious congressional debate, just a post and then the bombs. The strikes in Operation Epic Fury differed drastically from Operation Midnight Hammer. The February 28th strikes targeted leadership, military installations, missile production sites, and the remnants of Iran's nuclear program, a campaign widely understood as having regime change as its ultimate ambition, even if not formally declared as a goal. The opening strike killed Iran's supreme leader. At 6:45 in the morning local time, the Israeli Air Force began an unprecedented wave of what were called decapitation strikes. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and several high officials who were attending 3 meetings at his residential compound were killed, as were members of his family. And in the days and weeks that followed, the conflict expanded with extraordinary speed across the entire region. Iran launched retaliatory strikes on U.S. military bases across 8 countries. It targeted oil infrastructure in the Gulf. It struck Israeli cities. The Strait of Hormuz became a war zone. The conflict disrupted global travel and trade, halted flights in and out of the Middle East, and led to shipping reroutes to avoid the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea. More than 2,000 people have been killed across Iran, Lebanon, and Israel. And all of this was set in motion while a diplomatic breakthrough was reportedly on the table. Now we return to Saturday night, to Dimona, to the moment the war entered genuinely nuclear territory. Iranian state television framed the strikes on Dimona and Arad as a response to an attack on Iran's Natanz nuclear enrichment complex earlier in the day, marking a stark new phase of tit-for-tat targeting in the conflict now in its 4th week. And what made Saturday categorically different from every previous exchange in this conflict is that for the first time, both sides struck infrastructure connected to the other's nuclear program on the same day. Natanz hit in the morning. Dimona's surrounding cities hit at night. The nuclear dimension of this war, which had always been present as a threat in the background, moved to center stage. Iran's parliament speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf said that if the Israeli regime is unable to intercept missiles in the heavily protected Dimona area, it is operationally a sign of entering a new phase of the battle. That is a precise observation, and the Israelis themselves essentially confirmed it. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the fact no one was killed in either city was due to luck. If you want proof that Iran endangers the entire world, he said, the last 48 hours have given it. But here is what Netanyahu's statement carefully avoids engaging with, and what almost no American media outlet is asking directly. If Israel's air defenses, which are layered with Arrow, David's Sling, and Iron Dome systems, and which have intercepted hundreds of Iranian projectiles throughout this conflict, could not stop 2 missiles near the most sensitive nuclear site on Israeli soil, then what does that tell us about the true state of this war? The missiles that hit the 2 towns carried conventional warheads with hundreds of kilograms of explosives. Air defenses had engaged both projectiles, but the interceptors failed to knock them down. The Israeli Air Force said Sunday that the failure to intercept the missiles in both cases was not a systemic problem, that the circumstances in each case were unrelated, and that the fact the incidents took place in the same area within 2 hours was a coincidence. 2 intercept failures near the same target area within 2 hours, and that is officially being called a coincidence. You are entitled to form your own view about that explanation. What is not in dispute is the human reality. Galita Mir, a 50-year-old care provider who runs a care home not far from the nuclear site, told reporters, "We thought we were safe. Dimona is the most safe place in Israel. We didn't expect this." That sentence tells you something profound about the nature of security, about the illusions that people and governments build around themselves, and about how quickly those illusions can collapse. The people of Dimona believed that proximity to Israel's most powerful and most secret installation meant protection. They believed that the ring of steel around that facility extended to them as well. Saturday night told a different story. And now let us address the thing that is most deeply buried in the coverage of all of this. The thing that intelligence analysts and non-proliferation experts are genuinely losing sleep over, and that the public is largely unaware of. The central stated justification for this entire war was the prevention of Iranian nuclear proliferation. The argument was that Iran's nuclear program represented an unacceptable and imminent threat, and that military force was the only remaining option after diplomacy, allegedly, had failed. But here is what the most credible institutions in the world are now saying about the actual proliferation consequences of this war. Iran still possesses 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, and the exact location of that nuclear material remains unknown. Iran's cadre of specialized nuclear and missile scientists may be scattered by the conflict. If the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran collapses, Iranian nuclear scientists could pose proliferation risks to non-state actors or outside countries interested in proliferation. That is the Center for Strategic and International Studies, one of Washington's most respected and establishment-aligned research institutions, telling you in plain language that this war may have created the very conditions it was designed to prevent. According to the IAEA, Iran maintains a stockpile of 440.9 kilograms of uranium enriched up to 60% purity, a short technical step away from weapons-grade levels of 90%. That stockpile could allow Iran to build as many as 10 nuclear bombs should it decide to weaponize its program. Such highly enriched nuclear material should normally be verified every month, according to the IAEA's guidelines. In the absence of direct access to nuclear sites, the IAEA has been forced to rely on commercially available satellite imagery. Let that sink in for a moment. The International Nuclear Watchdog, the body specifically created and mandated to prevent nuclear weapons proliferation, cannot verify the location or status of enough enriched uranium to build 10 nuclear bombs. It is working from commercial satellite photos. This is the state of nuclear accountability in the fourth week of a war that was launched, in part, in the name of nuclear accountability. 2 military campaigns have made that stockpile harder, not easier to find. The administration's own claim that Iran could produce weapons-grade material within a week implies that a covert sneak-out is a near-term possibility. Without boots on the ground, the United States will be unable to conduct reliable bomb damage assessments to gauge the impact of the strikes or the state of Iran's remaining fissile material. Damaged declared facilities provide cover for covert reconstitution, and the absence of inspectors since the summer of 2025 means there is no baseline against which to detect it. Read that again slowly, because it is not coming from a fringe critic or a conspiracy theorist. It is coming from analysts who study these questions professionally at institutions funded in part by the American foreign policy establishment itself. The war that was meant to solve the nuclear problem may have made the nuclear problem functionally unsolvable by conventional means. As of the IAEA's last verified inspection on June 13, 2025, the day Israeli strikes began, Iran possessed 440.9 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%. This is the largest stockpile of highly enriched uranium held by any non-nuclear weapon state in history. Since June 13, 2025, the IAEA has had no access to any of Iran's 4 declared enrichment facilities. It cannot verify the size, location, or status of the stockpile. 9 months. 9 months without any international inspector setting foot inside any Iranian nuclear facility. And during those 9 months, a war began. Facilities were bombed, scientists scattered. The political and administrative structure that managed and controlled that material has been shattered. In late 2024, U.S. and Israeli intelligence detected a secret team of Iranian weapons engineers exploring how to build a crude nuclear device, a gun-type fission device so simple it does not require testing and could be produced in as little as 6 months. The question being asked in quiet rooms in Washington, Jerusalem, London, and Beijing right now is not whether Iran was pursuing a bomb. The question is whether the events of the last 9 months have actually made a bomb more or less likely to materialize, and in whose hands. It is not clear how much damage Iran has sustained in the U.S. and Israeli strikes that began February 28th, or even who is truly in charge of the country. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei has not been seen in public since being named to the role. Think about what that means for a country of 90 million people with nuclear-adjacent materials scattered across multiple partially destroyed underground facilities. There is a new Supreme Leader who has not appeared in public. There is no functioning command and control structure that outsiders can monitor or engage with. There is no IAEA access, and Iranian missiles are still flying, still finding gaps in the most advanced missile defense systems on Earth, still reaching cities that were supposed to be safe, still landing within 10 kilometers of a nuclear facility that Israel has never officially admitted exists. The IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi urged that maximum military restraint should be observed, in particular in the vicinity of nuclear facilities. That is the head of the world's nuclear watchdog making a public plea for restraint near nuclear sites, and both sides are responding by hitting more nuclear-adjacent targets. Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Maria Zakharova said such strikes posed a real risk of catastrophic disaster throughout the Middle East. These are not fringe voices. These are the institutions and the governments that the international order is supposed to be built around, and they are watching the rules and boundaries of nuclear security being eroded in real time, strike by strike, with no clear pathway to de-escalation and no functional diplomatic channel remaining. There is a resident of Dimona, a woman named Galit Amir, who said something on Sunday morning that stays with me. She said, "We thought we were safe." She was standing in the rubble of her sense of security in a city that sits beside what is almost certainly Israel's most consequential secret, and she was telling the world that nobody saw this coming, that everyone assumed the protection was airtight, that the system would hold. That sentence is bigger than Dimona. That sentence describes the psychological condition of a world that built its post-Cold War security architecture on a set of assumptions about diplomacy, about deterrence, about the manageable nature of nuclear risk that are now being tested in ways those assumptions were never designed to survive. The war in the Negev desert is not just a regional conflict. It is a stress test of everything the post-1945 order promised to prevent. And right now, watching ballistic missiles land near undeclared nuclear facilities, while inspectors work from satellite photos and enriched uranium sites in unknown locations beneath the rubble of bombed-out facilities, the results of that stress test are not encouraging. Pay attention to what happens next, because the next move in this sequence will tell us a great deal about whether anyone in a position of power is genuinely trying to find a way out, or whether we are all still moving deeper in.